Welcome everyone, I'm Dusky Nights, and before we begin I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you? Drop a comment below. Also, I want to know what kind of stories you enjoy, and make sure to listen till the end. I was 7 when he told me he would wait for me. I laughed. I did not understand what he meant. But now, as I stare at the photograph he left on my pillow, taken just days ago, I finally do. He has been watching me all these years. And tonight, he is here. I was 7 years old when I first met Raymond Foster. My parents had hired him to repaint the exterior of our house just before Valentine's Day, a chilly afternoon in 1995 F. He was in his mid-30s. Quiet, and always kept to himself. But there was something about him that unsettled me even then. He had a strange way of watching people, eyes lingering a bit too long, expression unreadable. One afternoon I was playing in the yard when I felt someone watching me. I turned to see Raymond standing by his paint cans, a slight smile on his lips. "You have a nice smile, Ellie," he said. "You should always be happy." I remember feeling uncomfortable, but I was too young to understand why. My mother called me inside, and I did not think much of it after that. The job lasted a week, and when Raymond finished, my parents thanked him, paid him, and he left. But before he did, he knelt in front of me, his eyes unnervingly intense. "I will see you again someday, Ellie," he whispered. "I will wait." At the time, it seemed like a harmless farewell, but something about the way he said it stayed with me. Years passed, and I forgot about Raymond. Life moved forward. By the time I was 16, my world revolved around school, friends, and the occasional crush. That Valentine's Day, my best friend Lisa and I were walking home from school when we noticed an old beat-up truck parked across the street from my house. The windows were tinted, but I could see the silhouette of a man sitting inside. "That is creepy," Lisa muttered, nudging me. I tried to ignore it, but later that evening when I took the trash out, the truck was still there. The hairs on my arms stood up. A few nights later, my mother mentioned she had seen someone outside while she was closing the curtains. "It was probably nothing," she said with a shrug. "Just someone lost." But I knew, deep down I knew. One evening I was alone at home when the phone rang. I picked it up, expecting Lisa, but there was only silence. Then, a familiar voice, deep and slow. "Ellie, it has been a long time." My breath caught in my throat. "Who is this?" "You have grown up so beautifully," he continued as if I had not spoken. "I told you I would wait for you." I slammed the phone down and locked every door in the house. I could not sleep that night, my mind replaying his words. By the time I turned 18, I had convinced myself it was all in my head. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe it had just been a prank. But then, on Valentine's Day, a package arrived at my doorstep. No return address. Inside was a small velvet box. My hands trembled as I opened it, revealing a delicate gold locket. Inside was a tiny photo. Me, at 7 years old, standing in my front yard. I recognized it instantly. It had been taken the week Raymond had been at our house. My stomach churned. I told my parents, and they dismissed it as a mistake, maybe a gift from a relative. But I knew better. The next few years were quiet. I went to university, made new friends, started fresh, but every Valentine's Day, something arrived. A single red rose, a handwritten note with no signature. Always the same message: "I will wait." I never told anyone. Who would believe me? Then, on February 14, 2010, everything changed. I had just returned from a date when I noticed something unusual. The window to my bedroom was slightly open. I never left it open. My heart pounded as I stepped inside. That was when I saw it. A photo lay on my pillow. It was recent. I spun around, and there he was, Raymond. He was older now, his face worn but his eyes, His eyes were exactly the same. "Ellie," he whispered, "you are finally alone." My mind raced. How had he gotten inside? Had he been following me all these years? I backed toward the door, but he moved fast, blocking my path. "I have been patient," he murmured, his voice almost tender. "I waited like I promised. You were just a child then, but now you are ready." Cold terror gripped me. "Get out!" I choked. He tilted his head. "I know you feel it too. We were meant to be together." I lunged for my phone, but he grabbed my wrist. His grip was iron, fingers digging into my skin. "No," he said firmly. "You are not leaving me." Panic surged through me. I did the only thing I could. I screamed. I screamed loud enough for the entire building to hear. Footsteps thundered outside. Raymond's eyes flicked toward the door just as it burst open. My neighbor Mark stormed in, followed by two others. Raymond let go of me, stepping back, his expression darkening. "You ruined it," he murmured, his voice breaking. "We were supposed to be together." The police arrived minutes later. They arrested him, but as they dragged him away, he locked eyes with me one last time. "I will wait," he whispered. For weeks, I barely slept. The thought of him haunted me. The police found his truck parked near my apartment, filled with photographs of me from over the years, notes detailing my routine, letters he had written planning our future. I changed my number, moved across the city. But every Valentine's Day, my heart still pounds when the doorbell rings, when a package arrives, when the phone rings just once and then goes silent. Because deep down, I know he is still waiting. The first time I saw him, I thought it was a coincidence. The second time, I convinced myself it was paranoia. But when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, telling me I run fast, I knew I was being hunted. "My name is Daniel Carter. I am 22 years old, a university student studying psychology, and I work part-time at a bookstore. It was February 14th, a night I should have spent with my girlfriend, but we had argued earlier over something trivial. Instead of celebrating, I found myself alone, craving something warm to eat. It was 9:30 p.m. when I stepped out into the freezing night. Snowflakes drifted lazily under the glow of the streetlights, settling on the quiet streets. Most people were either at home with their loved ones or out enjoying their Valentine's plans. The restaurant I ordered from was only a 15-minute walk away, and I welcomed the solitude, hoping the cold air would clear my mind. As I strolled through the dimly lit streets, I noticed how eerily silent everything was. Even the usual buzz from bars and late-night diners seemed muted, as if the entire town had taken a breath and forgotten to exhale. Then I felt it, a subtle creeping sensation crawling up my spine. I glanced over my shoulder and saw nothing but rows of houses, their windows glowing warmly from within. Shrugging it off, I continued walking, but that gnawing feeling of being watched refused to leave. Ahead, I spotted a convenience store still open and decided to stop inside, if only to shake off the strange unease. The bell chimed as I entered, and the bored-looking cashier barely glanced up from his phone. I picked up a bottle of iced tea and pretended to browse the shelves, all the while keeping an eye on the store's glass front. That was when I saw him. A man stood outside, just at the edge of the store's fluorescent glow. He wore a dark hoodie, his hands buried deep in his pockets, his head slightly tilted as if listening for something. But it was his posture that unsettled me, rigid, unmoving. He was waiting. For what? For me? I paid for my drink and took a deep breath before stepping back outside. The cold bit at my exposed skin, but something else made my blood turn to ice. The man was gone. I scanned the street, but there was no sign of him. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe he was just another guy waiting for someone. I pushed forward, my pace quicker now. A few minutes later, I arrived at the small restaurant. The warmth and aroma of freshly cooked meals offered temporary relief from my nerves. I collected my order, a steaming box of stir-fry, and stepped back into the night. The walk home felt longer than before. Every shadow stretched unnaturally, and the wind carried whispers that were not there. My instincts screamed at me to keep moving, to get inside and lock the door behind me. Then I heard it. Footsteps, soft at first, almost hesitant. I turned sharply, my breath visible in the cold air. The street was empty. I was about to dismiss it when I caught something from the corner of my eye. A dark figure standing beneath the street lamp at the far end of the road. My stomach dropped. It was him. He did not move, but I could feel his gaze burning into me from beneath his hood. I forced myself to keep walking, every nerve in my body on high alert. The moment I turned a corner, I broke into a run. My heart pounded in my chest as I sprinted through the snow-covered streets, my breath ragged. I reached my apartment complex, fumbled with my keys, and shoved the door open before slamming it shut behind me. I stood there, panting, my ears straining for any sound beyond the thick wooden door. Silence. After a few minutes, I let out a shaky laugh. Maybe I had imagined the whole thing. The stress, the argument with my girlfriend, the eerie emptiness of the streets. It all played tricks on my mind. I set my food on the counter, locked the door, and double-checked the windows before finally sitting down to eat. That was when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Happy Valentine's Day, Daniel. You run fast." My breath hitched. I reread the message, hoping I had misread it. Then another text. "I should have caught you when I had the chance." A cold sweat broke out over my skin. My hands shook as I dialed my girlfriend's number, desperate to hear a familiar voice. It rang once, twice. Then the power went out. I was plunged into darkness. A faint tap echoed from the window. I turned slowly, my heartbeat deafening in my ears. There, just beyond the glass, was the outline of a man. He raised a hand and knocked. 3 slow, deliberate taps. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the coffee table. My phone was the only source of light, the screen illuminating the message that sent terror coursing through my veins. "Let me in, Daniel. It is cold out here." My fingers trembled as I dialed 999. The moment I pressed call, the knocking stopped. I held my breath. Silence. Then my phone buzzed once more. "Next time, I will not wait." The screen flickered. The power returned. I rushed to the window, but he was gone. Only faint footprints remained in the snow outside. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, there was no trace of him. No cameras had caught his face. No one had seen anything. It was as if he had never been there. But I knew better, because the next night I found another message. "Valentine's Day was fun. Let us do it again next year. I live alone. No one has a key but me. So why did I come home to find a single white rose on my kitchen counter, in a glass of water, like someone had been waiting for me? My name is Emily Carter. I am 29 years old, and I work as a freelance graphic designer. I live alone in a 1-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a modern high-rise in downtown Chicago. I have always loved my independence, but lately I have started feeling uneasy in my own home. It began 2 weeks ago on a Monday evening. I had just wrapped up a client project when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. No caller ID. I hesitated before answering. Silence. Hello? Nothing. I hung up, assuming it was a wrong number. But then it happened again the next night, and the night after that. Each time, the same eerie silence. Then the delivery started. A bouquet of white roses arrived at my doorstep on Wednesday. There was no note. I assumed it was a mistake. But the next day, another bouquet appeared, this time red roses. I asked the concierge if they had seen who left them, but they had no record of any delivery. By Friday, I started double-checking my locks. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was just someone playing a harmless prank. But then, something happened that I could not explain. That night, I returned from dinner with my friend Hannah. I stepped into my apartment and immediately sensed something was off. Nothing was missing, nothing was out of place, but my gut told me I was not alone. I checked the closets, the bathroom, even under the bed. Nothing. I told myself I was being paranoid, but then I noticed something on the kitchen counter, a single white rose placed in a glass of water. The next morning I called the building manager and asked if anyone had entered my unit. He assured me that security was tight and no one could have accessed it without a key, but I knew what I saw. That night I placed a chair against my front door before going to bed. I barely slept. Every sound made my heart pound. I considered calling the police, but what would I tell them? That someone might have entered my apartment and left a flower? They would think I was imagining things. At 3:12 a.m. I woke up suddenly. My apartment was dark, but something felt wrong. I reached for my phone, and as my screen lit up, I noticed a message. "You look beautiful when you sleep." My blood turned to ice. I scanned the room, my breathing shallow. Who sent this? How did they know I was sleeping? My blinds were shut. My door was locked. But then a realization hit me. I had never checked the vents. Heart pounding, I grabbed my phone's flashlight and pointed it at the air vent above my bed. And that is when I saw it. A small, black camera lens peeking through the slats. I bolted out of bed and ran into the hallway, my hands trembling as I dialed 911. The operator kept asking me to stay calm, but I could not. My entire body was shaking. The police arrived within minutes. They checked the vent and confirmed my worst fear. There was a small, wireless camera hidden inside. They searched the apartment for any other devices and found another camera under my bathroom sink. But the worst part? The cameras were transmitting live. Someone had been watching me. The officers questioned me about anyone who might have access to my apartment. I gave them my landlord's number and told them about the strange calls and deliveries. They promised to investigate, but they did not seem hopeful. I could not stay there. I packed a bag and went to stay at Hannah's place for the night. I barely slept. Every shadow, every sound made my skin crawl. The next day, I received another message. "Running will not help. I always know where you are." I felt sick. How did they know? I had left my apartment. I had not told anyone where I was going except the police. Was my phone being tracked? I switched it off and borrowed Hannah's spare phone to call my brother. He insisted I move in with him for a while. I agreed. I needed to be somewhere safe. That night, at my brother's house, I finally felt like I could breathe. He had installed extra locks and cameras around his place just to be safe. I told myself it was over. Then, at exactly 2:47 a.m., the doorbell rang. My brother and I exchanged a nervous glance. He grabbed a baseball bat and looked through the peephole. No one was there. But on the doorstep, there was a small, wrapped box. He slowly picked it up and opened it. Inside was a single white rose, and beneath it, a tiny black USB drive. I plugged it into my laptop, my hands shaking. A video file appeared. I clicked on it. The footage was from inside my apartment, from my bedroom. It showed me lying in bed, sleeping peacefully, and then the closet door slowly creaked open. A figure stepped out. A man, dressed in black, wearing a mask. He stood at the foot of my bed, watching me sleep for what felt like an eternity. Then, without a sound, he turned to the camera, raised a gloved hand, and waved. The screen went black. I could not breathe. I felt my brother's hand on my shoulder, but I was frozen. This was not just someone watching me from a distance. They had been inside my home, standing over me. And the worst part? I had never woken up. The police took the USB as evidence, but their response was the same. They would investigate, but I knew what that meant. They had no leads, no suspects. I had changed locations, but it did not matter. He had found me once. He would find me again, and I had no idea when or how, but I knew one thing for certain. He was still watching. If you ever feel like something is off in your home, trust your instincts. Check your vents. Check your locks. And if you think someone is watching you, do not wait until it is too late. When I found the red envelope in my locker, I thought it was a harmless Valentine's Day note. But now, standing in the dark, clutching a notebook filled with chilling threats, I realize I was never meant to find this. And someone is coming to make sure I never tell. My name is Eleanor Reed, and I am 17 years old. I attend Crescent Hill High, a quiet school nestled in a town where nothing truly exciting ever happens, or at least that is what I used to think. Valentine's Day had always been an uneventful day for me. A few girls in my class would receive roses, a couple of grand gestures would take place in the hallways, and the rest of us would just go about our day pretending not to care. But this year was different. It began when I found a small red envelope in my locker. The paper was thick, textured, and had a faint scent of something floral, like dried roses. Inside was a single folded note, written in deep crimson ink. "Tonight, under the bleachers, I will be waiting." There was no name, no signature, nothing to hint at who had sent it. I looked around the hallway, half expecting to catch someone watching me, but no one did. The usual chatter and rustling of books filled the air. Everything so... I should have ignored it. I should have torn up the note and thrown it away, but I did not. At 7:30 p.m., the school was mostly empty. The only sound was the distant hum of the janitor's radio echoing through the halls. I hesitated before stepping onto the field, my breath forming small clouds in the cold night air. The bleachers loomed ahead, dark and silent. "Hello?" I called out. No response. The wind rustled through the trees. The metal seats groaned slightly as I stepped closer. Then, beneath the bleachers, I saw something. A small black notebook. It was just sitting there, half buried in the dirt, as if someone had left it behind in a hurry. I knelt down, picked it up, and flipped through the pages. The first few were filled with neat, careful handwriting. At first I thought it was poetry, fragmented thoughts about love, longing, and obsession. But as I read further, the words darkened. The sentences became jagged, rushed, frenzied. "She does not see me, but she will, soon. They laugh at me now, but they will never laugh again. February 14th, the day everything changes." I felt my stomach drop. I flipped to the last page. There was a crude sketch of our school, hallways, classrooms, and small X marks placed over specific spots. The cafeteria, the library, and worst of all, my homeroom. At the bottom of the page, one final message was scrawled in angry, uneven letters. "They will all remember my name." My hands shook. I slammed the notebook shut, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I needed to show someone. Mr. Carter, the principal, the police, anyone. Then I heard it, the sound of footsteps. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. A figure stood at the edge of the field, just beyond the reach of the floodlights. "Who is there?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Silence. Then the figure took a step forward. I recognized him immediately. Daniel Cole, a quiet, awkward boy from my class. He was always alone, always scribbling in his notebook, and he was holding something in his hands, something metallic. The dim light caught the edge of a knife. I turned and ran. I did not stop until I reached the school doors. My fingers fumbled as I yanked them open, darting inside. The hallways were dark, the only light coming from the distant glow of the vending machines. I needed to hide. I ducked into the nearest classroom, pressing myself against the wall. My breathing was loud, too loud. Then a noise, a click. The doorknob was turning. I held my breath as the door creaked open. A shadow stretched across the floor. "I know you have it, Eleanor." Daniel's voice was calm, almost amused. I stayed silent, clutching the notebook to my chest. "You should not have come tonight," he continued. "But it is okay. You are special. That is why I picked you." I felt something cold against my spine. The window. A plan formed in my mind. Slowly I reached for the latch. One movement, one chance. I threw the window open and jumped. The fall knocked the breath out of me, but I forced myself to my feet. I sprinted toward the parking lot, ignoring the pain in my knees. Behind me, Daniel's footsteps thundered against the pavement. Closer, faster. Then, headlights. A car was pulling in. I waved frantically, screaming. The car screeched to a stop, and the driver, Mr. Carter, stepped out, confusion turning to alarm as he saw me. "Eleanor, what is—" Daniel stopped a few feet away. His face was blank, his hands empty. The knife was gone. "Help!" I gasped, shoving the notebook into the principal's hands. "Read it." Mr. Carter's eyes flickered between us before he opened the pages, and his expression changed. The police arrived shortly after. They searched Daniel's locker and found more. Detailed plans, printed maps of the school, a list of names. My name was circled. He was taken away in handcuffs, but he never looked at me, not once. The next day, the school whispered about what had happened. Some refused to believe it. Others said they always knew something was off about Daniel. And then there were the notes, dozens of them, scattered across the school. Some were crumpled on the floors, others stuffed into lockers, each one written in the same jagged handwriting. "It is not over." I tried to ignore them. I tried to convince myself that Daniel was gone, that I was safe. But on February 15th, I opened my locker and found a single red envelope. Inside was a note. "You were supposed to be mine." I never told anyone about that last message. Somewhere, I know he is watching, and one day I fear he will return. What would you have done in Eleanor's place? Would you have gone to meet your secret admirer, or do you think Daniel was acting alone? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, not every Valentine's Day gesture is made with love. Some come with something much darker. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of someone whispering my name. When I opened my eyes, she was standing there, barefoot, watching me from the dark hallway, smiling. "My name is Elena Carter, and I am 23 years old. I work as a barista while finishing my degree in psychology. The story I'm about to tell you still makes my hands tremble when I think about it. It started on an ordinary evening, but it ended with me questioning everything I thought I knew about people. It began last winter when I met Daniel Whitmore. He was 26, charming and oddly reserved. We met at the bookstore I visited every Thursday. He approached me in the philosophy section, casually striking up a conversation about Nietzsche. His deep brown eyes held something unreadable, but I dismissed it. After all, I was still healing from a breakup and appreciated the distraction. Our relationship moved quickly, too quickly in hindsight. Within weeks, Daniel insisted I spend most nights at his place. He lived in a secluded home at the end of Hawthorne Lane, a road so quiet it felt forgotten by time. His house was old, its walls lined with bookshelves, the air thick with the scent of cedar and something else, something faintly metallic that I could never place. One night, about 2 months into our relationship, Daniel introduced me to his mother, Marianne Whitmore. She was in her late 50s, with short silver hair and piercing green eyes that never seemed to blink enough. The moment she laid eyes on me, a strange smile crept across her lips. It was not warm, it was not kind, it was possessive. "Elena," she said, drawing my name out like a lullaby. "You are even prettier than Daniel described." Her hand lingered too long on mine when we shook hands, her nails pressing slightly into my skin. Dinner that night was uncomfortable. Marianne watched me closely, her eyes darting between me and Daniel as if assessing something unspoken. I felt like I was being studied. "You will be good for him," she murmured suddenly, her voice carrying an eerie certainty. "You are strong, but you can be molded." I laughed nervously. Daniel did not. He simply nodded in agreement. That was my first red flag. A week later, strange things started happening. My toothbrush was missing one morning, only to reappear in a different holder. My phone charger disappeared, then turned up in a drawer I had never used. I felt like I was losing my mind, but Daniel dismissed my concerns. "My mother likes things a certain way," he said with an amused grin. She probably moved them without thinking. That night I woke up to a soft sound, a whisper. I sat up listening, my heart pounding. The house was silent except for the faint creak of the wooden floorboards outside our bedroom. Someone was standing there. I nudged Daniel, whispering his name, but he did not stir. The floor creaked again. Slowly I got out of bed and tiptoed to the door. My fingers trembled as I turned the knob and peered out into the dimly lit hallway. Marianne stood at the far end, barefoot, her nightgown flowing around her like mist. She was staring at me. "Go back to bed, dear," she said softly, her voice too sweet, too rehearsed. "You need your rest." I stepped back, shutting the door, my breath shaky. I did not sleep that night. The following morning, Daniel had to leave early for work. He kissed my forehead and promised to be home by 6:30 p.m. I decided to leave too, but when I reached for the door, I found it locked. All of them were. The front door, the windows, even the side entrance leading to the garden. Every exit had been bolted shut from the outside. Marianne emerged from the kitchen, holding a cup of tea. "You are not well, Elena," she said in a sing-song voice. "You have been sleepwalking. It is dangerous for you to leave." I felt ice crawl up my spine. "I need to go home," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. She sighed, setting the tea down. "I knew it would take time," she murmured, almost to herself. "But you are resisting more than I expected." Then she turned and walked away, humming softly as she disappeared down the hall. I rushed to the phone on the counter, my fingers dialing 911. Dead. The line was dead. Hours passed. Darkness crept in and Daniel was still not home. I was trapped in that house, pacing the living room, my mind racing for a plan. Then I saw something that made my stomach drop. A row of framed photographs lined the fireplace mantel. Photos of Daniel with different women. Each woman had the same haunted eyes. Each woman looked eerily like me. And then, in the very last frame, I saw something that made my breath catch. It was not just a picture, it was a missing persons poster. Her name was Rachel Evans, and the date on the poster was from 3 years ago. Beneath it, in faded ink, was a handwritten note. "Failed experiment. Start again." My pulse thundered in my ears. I had to get out. I waited until the house was completely silent. Then, carefully, I pried open a window in the laundry room, one of the few that was not nailed shut. Just as I was about to climb out, a voice stopped me. "You disappoint me, Elena." I whirled around. Marianne stood in the doorway, her expression eerily calm. "You were supposed to be different." She took a step forward. I grabbed the closest thing I could, a glass vase, and hurled it at her. It shattered against the wall as I scrambled through the window, landing hard on the frozen ground outside. I ran. Branches scratched my arms as I tore through the woods, my breath visible in the cold night air. Behind me I heard her voice, still composed, still unshaken. "You will come back, Elena." I did not stop. I did not look back. I reached the nearest gas station, breathless, my hands shaking as I borrowed a phone to call the police. By the time they arrived at Hawthorne Lane, the house was empty. No sign of Daniel. No sign of Marianne. The photos were gone. The missing persons poster had vanished. The only thing the officers found was a single handwritten note left on the kitchen counter. "You were almost perfect." I have not seen Daniel or Marianne since that night. But sometimes, when I am alone, I swear I can still hear her humming, "Waiting." If you ever find yourself in a relationship that moves too quickly, where the people around you seem too controlling, trust your instincts. Some love stories do not end in heartbreak. Some end in horror. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever ignored a red flag? The diner was empty except for him. He sat there, staring, smiling like he knew me. But I swear I have never seen him before. Then he said the words that made my blood run cold. "I will be back." At 2 a.m., just like last time. Valentine's Day has always been a quiet shift at the diner. A few couples, some lonely souls looking for comfort food, but mostly It was uneventful. That night I worked the late shift alone, manning the counter while the cook, Charlie, handled orders in the back. It was just past 11 p.m. when the bell above the door jingled. A man walked in. He looked out of place, mid-40s, dressed in a worn-out trench coat, his hair slicked back in an old-fashioned style. His eyes scanned the empty booths before settling on me. A small, eerie smile stretched across his face. "You are still here," he said, sitting at the counter. I frowned. "Excuse me?" He chuckled, shaking his head. "Nothing, just strange to see you again." I did not recognize him. My fingers twitched as I reached for the coffee pot. "Would you like a coffee?" He nodded, eyes never leaving me. As I poured, he leaned in. "You do not remember, do you?" My stomach nodded. I forced a smile. "I do not think we have met." He let out a long sigh, drumming his fingers against the counter. "We have? I was here last year. Valentine's Day." Something in his voice made my skin prickle. I worked every Valentine's shift for years, but I could not recall him. "I am sorry, but I do not remember." He did not seem surprised. Instead, he leaned back, sipping his coffee with an unsettling patience. "It is all right. I will remind you." The bell above the door jingled again. A young couple walked in, giggling, breaking the tension. I exhaled, forcing myself to move. As I took their order, I could feel his eyes on me, watching, studying. By the time I turned back, his coffee cup was empty. He was still staring. "I will be back," he said, standing up. "At 2 a.m., just like last time." He placed a $5 bill on the counter and walked out into the cold. I shivered. The rest of my shift dragged. Every time the door creaked open, my heart jumped. Midnight passed, then 1. The diner emptied, leaving only me and Charlie. "I am heading out," he said, tossing his apron on the hook. "You good?" I hesitated. "Yeah, just tired." "You sure?" He studied me. "You look pale." I forced a smile. "I will be fine. It is just another late shift." Charlie nodded and left through the back door. I was alone. At 1:45 a.m., the diner was silent. The wind outside howled against the windows. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly. My fingers trembled as I refilled the sugar dispensers, my ears straining for any sound. Then, at exactly 2 a.m., the door creaked open. He was back, the same coat, the same eerie smile. But something was different. He was carrying something, a red envelope. He walked to the counter, sliding it toward me. "You should open it." I did not move. His voice was softer now. "Go on, it is for you." With shaky hands I picked it up. The envelope was old, its edges slightly yellowed. When I pulled out the card inside, my breath caught. It was a Valentine's card, and inside, in faded ink, was a message. "I will always come back, just like last time, just like next time." My pulse pounded in my ears. I looked up, my mouth dry. What is this?" He smiled. "You wrote it." I recoiled. "That is not possible." His expression darkened. "You do not remember, do you?" Panic clawed at my chest. I stood quickly, backing away. "I think you should leave," he sighed, tilting his head. "I already did, a long time ago." I reached for my phone, but the screen flickered and died. The lights above us dimmed. The diner felt wrong, like something had shifted. I blinked, and he was gone. The red envelope lay open on the counter, but the words inside had changed. "You will remember soon." I did not sleep when I got home. My hands still shook as I scrolled through the diner's security footage. 1:55 a.m., the diner was empty. 1:57 a.m., the door opened, but no one walked in. The footage showed the door swinging wide, then closing. The counter remained empty. Yet I had seen him, spoken to him. I rewound the footage, played it again. Nothing. My breath came in short gasps. I checked the footage from last year. Valentine's Day, 2 a.m. The door opened. Again, no one walked in, but the red envelope appeared on the counter. The same envelope. My head spun, my chest tightened. The man had never been there, but he would come back, just like he always did, and one day I would remember why. Valentine's Day came again. The diner once again was quiet. I had tried to convince myself it had all been a hallucination, a trick of exhaustion. But as the clock neared midnight, my heart pounded harder. I told myself I would not stay past my shift. I told myself I would leave early. I did not. At 1:57 a.m., the wind howled outside. The neon sign flickered. My breath came in short gasps as I stared at the entrance. At exactly 2 a.m., the door creaked open. No one was there. The red envelope lay on the counter. This time, my name was written on it. I used to think I was alone in my apartment until I saw myself leaving a red scarf outside my own door at 2:30 a.m. The problem is, I never left my bed. My name is Lena Carter, and I am 27 years old. I work as a barista in a small cafe in Seattle, the kind of place where regular customers feel like family. My shifts usually start at 2 p.m. and run until closing at 9 p.m. The cafe has warm wooden tones, the scent of fresh coffee filling the air, and the steady hum of conversation and soft jazz in the background. It all started on a cold February evening, just 2 weeks before Valentine's Day. There was a man sitting in the farthest corner of the cafe near the window. He was tall, possibly in his late 40s, and always wore a red scarf wrapped tightly around his neck. What unsettled me was that he never ordered anything. He just sat there, staring. His eyes followed me as I moved behind the counter, cleaning tables, making drinks. At first I thought he was just a quiet regular. We had customers who liked the atmosphere but did not order much. But as the days passed, he never left. He would arrive around 3:30 p.m., take the same seat, and just watch. No laptop, no book, not even a phone in his hands. Just watching. By the 5th day, I could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. He never spoke, never interacted, and worst of all, he never blinked when I looked his way. One night, while cleaning up, I mentioned it to Jake, my coworker. He was a year older than me, with shaggy brown hair and a laid-back attitude. "That is weird," Jake muttered, peering at the man over the espresso machine. "Maybe he is a writer or something." "A writer who does not write?" I asked. Jake shrugged. "Next time, ask if he wants something." So I did. The next day, as he took his usual seat, I walked up to him, forcing a polite smile. "Good evening. Can I get you anything?" He slowly tilted his head, his lips stretching into a small smile. "No." His voice was dry, like paper crumbling in your hands. I did not know what to say, so I just nodded and walked away. My skin crawled. From that moment, things escalated. I began seeing him outside of work. At first, it was small things. Walking home, I would glimpse a shadow in the distance wearing a red scarf. At the grocery store, I would feel a set of eyes on me, only to turn and see nothing. Then, on February 12th, I saw him standing outside my apartment building. I lived on the 3rd floor of a quiet complex, and my window overlooked the street. That night, just as I was getting ready for bed, I pulled my curtains open, and there he was, standing perfectly still beneath the street light. He was looking up at me. A shiver crawled up my spine. I stepped back. My heart pounded. Maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe he just happened to be there. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. He never moved. I slept with the lights on that night. By Valentine's Day, I was exhausted. The cafe was packed with couples. The air was thick with the smell of roses and chocolate. But I could not focus, because he was there, sitting at his usual spot, wearing that damn red scarf. But something was different. He was not watching me. He was smiling, not at me, at something behind me. A chill ran through my bones. Slowly I turned my head toward the large glass window that faced the street. It was foggy from the cold, but I could still make out the shapes of people passing by. Then, suddenly, one figure stopped, a tall, thin silhouette, wearing a red scarf. I felt the blood drain from my face, because the man outside was identical to the man sitting inside. Same height, same build, same scarf. But his face was blurred, like I was looking at a smudged painting. I spun back to the table. Empty. The chair was pushed back slightly, as if he had just gotten up. I rushed to the window, pressing my hands against the glass. The man outside was gone. My heart pounded. I turned to Jake. "Did you see where he went?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Jake frowned. "Who?" I felt my stomach drop. "The man sitting there, the one who has been watching me for weeks." Jake looked genuinely confused. "Lena, that table has been empty all night." That night, I locked every door and window in my apartment. The feeling of being watched was unbearable. At 2:30 a.m. my phone buzzed. A text message. "Unknown number. Look outside." I froze. My breathing became shallow. Slowly, I walked to the window. My hands trembled. The street below was empty. No cars, no people. Just the dim glow of the streetlights. Then I noticed it. A red scarf, neatly folded and placed, right outside my front door. I did not sleep. By morning I called in sick. I could not go to work. Not after that. By 5:15 p.m., I heard a knock at the door. I checked the peephole. Jake. Relief flooded me as I swung the door open. He looked concerned. "You have not answered your phone all day." I let him in, trying to stay calm. I told him everything. The man, the texts, the scarf. Jake frowned. "Lena, I think you should check your phone." Confused, I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. The text was gone. No message, no call history, nothing. Jake gave me a worried look. "Are you sure you are not just tired?" "No." My voice wavered. "I know what I saw." Jake sighed. "Then let us check the security cameras." The building had a security feed. We pulled up the footage for 2:30 a.m. The hallway outside my door appeared on the screen. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, at 2:28 a.m., a figure emerged from the stairwell. My stomach twisted. It was me, wearing my pajamas, holding the red scarf. I watched, horrified, as the version of me bent down and neatly folded the scarf outside my own door. Then, without hesitation, she turned to the camera. A slow, knowing smile spread across her face, and the screen cut to black. Jake left immediately, convinced I needed sleep. But I know the truth. Something is watching me. Something is inside of me. And it is only a matter of time before I stop being me completely. Have you ever had a feeling that you are being watched? By yourself? Let me know in the comments. I sliced into the donut expecting soft cherry cream. Instead, a sharp metallic glint stared back at me, a staple buried deep inside. And then the knocking started. I worked the late shift at Sweet Haven Bakery, a small family-run shop tucked between a laundromat and a convenience store. My name is Mia Carter, and I am 24 years old. I started working here to pay off student loans, but the job grew on me. The smell of fresh pastries, the hum of the ovens, the quiet rhythm of late-night baking. It felt safe, predictable. At least it used to. Valentine's Day is always busy. Customers want heart-shaped cookies, chocolate-covered strawberries, and our best-sellered Cupid's Delight donuts. This year, we planned a special batch, a limited edition, pink-glazed donut stuffed with cherry cream. Everything seemed normal at first. I started my shift at 10 p.m., alongside Derek, the owner's son. He handled the register while I prepped the first batch of donuts. The kitchen smelled of sugar and vanilla, and the radio played some old love songs. It felt like any other night. Then, at 11:15 p.m., something went wrong. I cut into one of the fresh donuts to check the filling, but instead of smooth cherry cream, a thin metallic object peeked out from the center. My stomach twisted as I pulled it free. It was a staple. Confused, I grabbed another donut and tore it open. Another staple. I ripped through more. Each one had the same thing. My hands trembled as I stared at the heap of pastries on the counter, their pink frosting smeared across my fingers. Someone had contaminated the entire batch. "Derek," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. "You need to see this." He walked in, yawning, but his eyes widened when he saw the mess. "What the hell?" he stared. "How did that get in there?" I had no idea. The filling machine was cleaned daily. The ingredients were fresh. There was no logical explanation, unless someone did it on purpose. A sick feeling settled in my gut. If I had not checked the donuts, they would have gone out to customers. Someone could have choked. Someone could have died. "We have to tell your dad," I said. Derek hesitated. "Maybe it was an accident." "An accident? Derek, this is serious." He ran a hand through his hair, glancing at the clock. "It is late. Maybe we can just—" He trailed off. Then the kitchen door creaked. We both froze. The shop was closed. No one else was here. But I could hear it. The soft scuff of footsteps just beyond the doorway. Derek turned off the radio. Silence. Then a sharp knock on the back door. My breath hitched. The back entrance was for deliveries, always locked after hours. I looked at Derek, expecting him to say something, but he just stared at the door like he was waiting for it to open. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, deliberate raps. I reached for the large metal whisk on the counter, gripping it tight. Who the hell would come here this late? Derek exhaled shakily. "There is a security camera by the door. Let me check the monitor." He left the kitchen. The bakery felt too quiet in his absence. The smell of sugar, once comforting, now felt suffocating. Then my phone vibrated in my pocket, a message from an unknown number. "Do not open the door." The air turned cold. My fingers hovered over the screen. Was this some kind of prank? Derek came back, his face pale. "Mia," he whispered, "there is no one on the camera." I swallowed. But we heard. Knock, knock, knock. The exact same sound, as if whoever was outside had not moved an inch. Derek's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and went completely still. Another message, from the same unknown number. "Check the fridge." I turned to the industrial-sized refrigerator, the stainless steel reflecting my own nervous face. Derek hesitated, then pulled the door open. Inside, stacked neatly on the middle shelf, were more Valentine's donuts, except these were different. Each one was carefully sliced open, exposing the cherry filling inside, and stuck into the soft dough, rows of neatly arranged staples, a twisted pattern, a message. Derek cursed under his breath. Who did this? Before I could respond, the lights flickered. A cold gust brushed against my skin, though the doors and windows were locked. Then, a single pink frosted donut rolled off the shelf and hit the floor. Neither of us moved. Then my phone buzzed again. "Look up." I lifted my gaze to the security mirror in the corner of the kitchen, and I saw him. A man in a black hoodie stood just beyond the doorway, motionless, watching us. His face was obscured, but I could see his hands, gloved and stained red, not with blood, with cherry filling. I whipped around, but there was no one there. The kitchen was empty. My heart pounded as I turned back to the mirror. He was still there, watching, waiting. Then he grinned. The lights went out. I screamed. Derek grabbed my wrist and yanked me toward the exit, but the door would not budge. Footsteps, fast, rushing toward us. Then a whisper directly in my ear. "Happy Valentine's Day, Mia." A sharp, searing pain shot up my arm. I stumbled back, gasping, and something clattered to the floor. A stapler. An old rusted stapler, its prongs bent and coated in red. The lights flickered back on. The man was gone. The kitchen was exactly as it had been before. Silent, untouched, completely normal. The tray of contaminated donuts still sat in the fridge. The door was no longer stuck. But my arm burned. A single staple was embedded in my skin. Derek's face was white. "We need to call someone." I nodded, my hands shaking, but as I reached for my phone, another message appeared. "See you next year." I looked at Derek. The phone slipped from my fingers. Who was he? How did he get in without the cameras catching him? And why did he know my name? I never got answers. But every Valentine's Day, when the bakery closes for the night, I swear I hear it. Knock, knock, knock. If you ever find something inside your food that should not be there, do not just throw it away, because maybe it was never meant for you to eat. It started with a rose on my car, then the texts came, and now, as I stare at my own reflection in a stranger's phone screen, I realize he has been inside my home. I have never been a fan of Valentine's Day. Something about the forced romance, the grand gestures, and the sea of red decorations always made me uneasy. Working at a small coffee shop in town only made it worse. Couples streamed in all day, ordering heart-shaped pastries and overpriced latte. It was business as usual until the notes started appearing. The first one was subtle, a small pink envelope tucked under the espresso. I thought it was a joke at first, maybe left by a coworker. Inside, the message was typed in neat, mechanical font. Your smile brightens my darkest days. A little strange, sure, but harmless. I tossed it in my apron pocket and moved on. Then came the second one, closing. The streets were empty, the cold wind whistling through the alleyway. As I locked up, I noticed a small card stuck to the shop's glass door. I watch you, even when you do not see me. Happy Valentine's Day, my love. A chill ran down my spine. I scanned the street. No one. Flickering streetlights and a distant hum of a passing car. I laughed it off. Probably some lovesick customer with an odd sense of humor. But something felt off. When I got home, I found another note. It was slipped under my apartment door. One day, you will love me too. I did not sleep that night. The next day, I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe it was just a prank. But as I stepped outside, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. A single red rose sat on my car's windshield. No note, this is the rose. I picked it up hesitantly, glancing around the empty parking lot. Someone had placed it there during the night. I confided in my co-worker, Jenna. She laughed, waving a dismissive hand. Oh, come on. You probably have a secret admirer. It is cute. Cute? Number unsettling? Yes. Still, I wanted to believe it was harmless until the texts started coming. I love the way you tie your hair up when you are busy. You look even more beautiful in blue. I froze. That morning, I had worn a blue sweater. You should smile more. You are prettier when you do. A wave of nausea hit me. My hands shook as I blocked the number, but it did not help. Blocking me will not change how I feel. You cannot ignore me forever. I was the last to leave the shop. The darkness felt thicker, the air heavier. As I approached my car, I felt it. Someone was watching me. I turned quickly, scanning the lot. Nothing, but then movement, a figure near the dumpster, a shadow shifting just beyond the streetlight's reach. My heart pounded as I hurried to my car, fumbling with my keys. I locked the doors the second I got in, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I should have gone to the police. I should have taken it more seriously, but I convinced myself it was paranoia. I was wrong. I woke up to a noise, a soft, deliberate tapping on my window. My heart leapt into my throat. I lived on the second floor. Slowly, I turned my head toward the window. My blood turned to a figure stood there, pressed against a man, pale, expressionless, his breath fogging up the pane. I could not scream. I could not move. Then he lifted his hand and showed me something. A phone. My latest selfie was on the screen. He had been in my apartment. I barely remember calling. The officers found no forced entry, no fingerprints, nothing. They told me to stay with someone, to be cautious, but I already knew the truth. He was still out there, watching, waiting. That night, I did not go home. I stayed at Jenna's, but I could not sleep. Every creak, every shift in the shadows outside made my skin crawl. The next day, I went back to my apartment, escorted by the police. My front door was locked, my windows shut. Nothing seemed out of place, but on my pillow there was another note. You can run, but you will always be mine. I moved out that same day, but I never felt safe again. Weeks passed, and I settled into a new apartment across town. I changed my number, quit my job, and started fresh. I convinced myself it was over, but then the flowers started again. A single red rose left on my doorstep, a note typed in that same mechanical font. Happy anniversary, my love. It had been exactly 1 year since the first note at the coffee shop. My hands trembled as I looked around, searching for him. The street was empty, but I knew better now. He was out there. He had never left. I ran inside and locked the door, my breath coming in short gasps. I pressed my back against the wall, willing myself to calm down. My phone buzzed in my pocket. An unknown number. Did you miss me? My heart nearly stopped. I wanted to scream, to run, to disappear, but I knew it would not matter. No matter where I went, no matter how far I tried to escape, he would always find me. And this time, I did not think he would let me go. The shop was empty, just me and him. Then, a gun tucked inside his jacket, and I knew this was not about flowers. The flower shop was quiet that evening. The hum of the refrigerator cases, the only sound filling the space. I was 17, working part-time at Bloom and Petals, a small floral boutique that always smelled of fresh roses and damp earth. Valentine's Day was the busiest time of the year, and by 6:30 p.m., the last-minute rush was over, and I had begun restocking the shelves when the bell above the door chimed. A man entered, his presence immediately unsettling. He was tall and gaunt, with sunken eyes that darted around the shop. He did not smile, just stood near the counter, his fingers twitching in the arrangement, looking for something special, trying to keep. He finally met an apology. His tone was flat, void of warmth. I swallowed hard, forcing a polite smile. Roses are always a classic choice. He nodded, his gaze never leaving mine. She likes lilies, he murmured. I carefully wrapped a bouquet of lilies in white paper. As I handed it to him, his fingers brushed mine. Cold, clammy. She will forgive me, right? He asked. My throat felt tight. I am sure she will. He exhaled sharply. Good, because I do not take rejection well. My stomach twisted, but I forced a small laugh, hoping he was joking. He held the bouquet for a long moment before slipping a crumpled bill onto the counter and walking out. The bell chimed again, and just like that, he was gone. I tried to shake it off. His words lingered. Over the next few weeks, I found myself thinking about him, wondering who the flowers were for, wondering if she ever forgave him. Then I forgot about it until 6 months later. It was mid-August, a slow evening at the sun had just set, painting the sky in deep orange and purple hue. The bell above the door rang, and when I looked, ran cold. He was dressed. This time, his hands were buried in his jacket. The shop suddenly small, the walls pressing. You remember me. His voice was softer now, but it sent a shiver down my lilies, right? He smiled. A slow, eerie curl of his. He stepped closer. The outline of a gun tucked. My pulse roared in my ears. My mind screamed for me to run, but my body refused to move. I swallowed, trying to keep my hand steady as I inched toward the register where my phone was. Sure, talking is good. He tilted his to be afraid, but I was. The next few seconds felt stretched, like time had slowed. He took another step forward. I grabbed the first thing I could, a glass vase, and hurled it at him. It shattered against his arm, water and petals flying. He staggered back, cursing. That was my chance. I sprinted for the back door, fumbling with the lock as he yelled behind me. My fingers found the latch, yanking the door open, just as a loud bang echoed through the shop. A gunshot. I ran. My feet pounded against the pavement as I bolted down the alley. My lungs burned, but I did not stop. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps, heavy, determined. A car passed by at the end of the alley, its headlights flashing over me. Desperate, I flung myself toward the street, waving frantically. The driver slammed I yanked the passenger door open and dove in. Drive, please. The driver, a woman in her 30s, took one look at Through the window, I saw him standing at the alleys. His expression was unreadable. The car sped away, and my breath finally came in ragged gasps. The woman dropped me at the nearest police station. My hands shook as I told them everything. When they returned to the shop, no proof of the broken and a single lily lying on the floor, petals stained with. They never found. Months. I quit my job I moved to a new city, started fresh, but sometimes I still feel it, that heavy, unsettling, and every Valentine's Day, I wonder if one day he will come back. Hello guys, which story scared you the most? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for listening everyone. If you stuck around until the end, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. As always, I'm looking for more story ideas, so drop a comment below with any themes or experiences you'd like to hear next. Stay safe out there, and until next time, keep your eyes open.